Hello there, welcome again to another lens test. So we're having another exciting set of anamorphic lenses, and this time we're taking a look at the Laowa Proteus lenses, with which we already have shot a short film last summer, a grounded sci-fi short film about a delivery girl and her AI assistant. And so we had already some experience with the lenses, but we were mainly interested in testing them out again because of the introduction of the 28mm, which wasn't available at the time. Last winter, when we published a test of the DZO Film Pavo series, we were actually approached by Laowa to also make a review of the Proteus lenses. Laowa sent us a 28, a 45 and a 100mm lens. Now the 100 we already had to send back, unfortunately, but the majority of the test we did with the 28 and the 45. And I think that makes sense because wide angle lenses tend to be harder to make look good. Maybe that translates also to cinematography in general, where okay, you take that long lens, you have that shallow depth of field, that compression, yeah, it almost instantly looks good, and the same thing for lenses. So I think it made sense for us to put mainly the wide angle lenses to the test. Now as you can see, these lenses are pretty big, they're fairly heavy too, which makes changing lenses not always the easiest on set or the fastest, especially, or actually I should say mainly if you use it with the EF mount that we are using on our camera. Because the lenses are so heavy that you need some lens support, and since you don't want the anamorphic lens to rotate or to rotate around the z-axis of the lens, it's very important to keep it steady with the focus motor. So you would always attach them here to the lens support bracket that it has. Not all lenses that we were provided with came with a support bracket, so we decided to use a different support. The support bracket allows for some tolerance. This makes sure the anamorphic element sits exactly straight. As with most lenses these days, they come with an interchangeable mount, so EF or PL, and both are in the box, which is great. It comes also with shims, so you can shim them to the exact flange distance of the sensor. And as well, and that's actually quite a nice thing, is you can change the back focus with a thumb screw, and that's much faster than dismounting the mount, changing shims, put it back on the lens, etc. A nice feature of the back focus adjustment is that you have to untighten it before adjusting. This prevents accidental changes. So let's have a closer look at the technical performance of these Proteus lenses. Let's start on the 28 with adjusting the back focus using the thumb screw. As you can see, there is quite a lot of space for adjustments. As with all anamorphic lenses, obtaining perfect back focus is key. If the back focus is off on spherical lenses, your focus scale will be simply off. Worst case, you cannot focus at infinity. When the back focus is off on anamorphic lenses though, you cannot get anything in focus. We did also back focus adjustments on the 45 and the 100mm. Now let's compare the field of view of the set we have, with the camera and model at static positions. Here's the 28, the 45 and the 100mm. Now let's also compare the field of view in combination with close focus. Here's the 28, the 45 and the 100. We see that the 100 offers the biggest magnification. Close focus is very good for anamorphic lenses. If you need to focus closer, you can also use diopters. The fact that these aren't needed for the majority of shots is a big time saver. Now let's check each lens separately. Let's start with the 28. Here we go through the focus range at T28. We can see that the horizontal focus breathing is well controlled. Of course, you can see a lot of vertical focus breathing. That's a characteristic of anamorphic lenses in general. By panning the camera, we can examine the distortion and the behavior of the flares. The distortion is very well controlled, with some complexity to it. I'd say it feels somewhat like barrel distortion, but the sides show actually pincushion distortion. I believe this is some kind of a moustache distortion pattern. Flares are very well controlled and maybe a little bit too well controlled, but I personally do like it. I find too much flaring merely distracting. Now let's see how the lens performs in terms of bokeh and sharpness through the aperture range. Our model moved a bit closer to the camera, so we can see the bokeh a bit better. Starting at T2, we can see the image is already sharp, with some moderate light fall off towards the edges. The bokeh is a little bit distorted, they're not perfectly ovals. Stopping down to T28 makes the image clear up a bit, and at T4 we may see optimal performance with near perfect oval shaped bokeh and almost no vignette. The background separation is of course a bit less than wide open, and actually we prefer the shallower depth of field and the slight vignette at T2 and T28, and it's great that these lenses are perfectly usable wide open and still offer very usable sharpness. And here we stop down further to T56, T8 and T11. We can see that the flares become sharper and the highlights form nice stars. Let's continue with the 45, ramping through the focus scale. We can see a bit of focus breathing, but nothing that would distract. You can also see an interesting difference in the flare rendering, depending on where the focus is at. This is the silver flare set, which means the flare should take the color of the light shining into the lens. Panning left and right shows a similar distortion pattern as with the 28. Having experience with the 35 of this set, it seems that lens shows a more severe pincushion distortion. The flares are magnified compared to the 28, so we see them a little bit more pronounced. Now let's have a look at sharpness, light fall off and bokeh. Again, our model moved a bit closer to the lens. Starting at T2, sharpness is already more than acceptable. The same goes for the bokeh shape. The size of these lenses certainly must help avoid too much of mechanical vignetting. Light fall off is noticeable, but I think it adds to the look of this lens. Stopping down to T28, bokeh form improves a bit, as well as the sharpness and fall off. At T4, again we find that the lens performs optimally. Here's a depth of field comparison between wide open and T2. Stopping down to T56, T8 and T11, we have much the same observations as with the 28. At some point we saw the sun just out of frame and we decided to see how the lens looks without a matte box. Here it is at T28 and T2. You can see that very bright sources certainly produce some nice flare elements, and these become more clear and defined when stopping down. Finally, let's put on the 100 and the matte box. Focusing from close to infinity, we can see a bit of focus breathing, but nothing that would overly distract. And I have to say, the oval shaped bokeh balls are very nicely rendered, very neutral and no onion rings. Again, the distortions are very well under control, as are the flares. Ramping through the iris range, we observe the same developments as with the other lenses of the set. At T2, the sharpness is acceptable, as is the bokeh shape. The lens improves a bit when we stop down to T28 and T4. After T56, the sharpness seems to increase still a bit more, but more notable are the definition of the lens flares. Now we deliberately made the technical test very similar to the test we did with the DZO Film Pavo lenses, so we can put them side by side, and I think that's very interesting because these are of course based on the price point and the market position. You would compare this set with the Proteus set, but they're very different lenses, and if we put them side by side we can see that a little bit. Here we compare both sets at T28. The framing is not exactly the same, but overall the differences come across well. The Proteus set is sharper and has arguably better bokeh shapes. The Pavos show quite a heavy barrel distortion, which may be to your liking. They certainly have character. Apart from this technical test, we made some more shots in the building, as well as in the picturesque Delfshaven area, almost next to our office. We also went a bit further away, to the beautiful Radio Kootwijk. Here you see an impression of a couple of hours with the Proteus set. So obviously we do like these lenses, otherwise we wouldn't have chosen them for our short film. Particularly the bokeh is really nice, creamy, very soft, very neutral bokeh. I think it's also an aspect of lenses that I personally really value, maybe most of all aspects of lenses. And I would say there's only one drawback with these lenses, and that's the pincushion distortion as opposed to barrel distortion. In the beginning I was a little bit more concerned about that. Especially because in our short film we were shooting in an architectural masterpiece. We see the straight lines of the buildings become a little bit bended towards the wrong direction. But on our test shoot now it didn't prove to be any problem at all. But even if it bothered me in some shots, it would be very easily corrected in post. Of course, it's not a step that you necessarily want to do, but if it's essential, you could just do that. And I have to say also, especially the 28mm, there the distortion seems to be less noticeable than, for example, with the 35. We didn't do the technical test here, but from what I remember when shooting our short on the 35, the pincushion distortion was quite severe. And that doesn't seem to be the case with the 28. The distortion pattern is much more pleasing to my eye, at least. So, would I recommend these lenses? Absolutely. I wouldn't go as far to say that this is a general purpose set of lenses, like our Sigma set. A Sigma set we can use on every shoot. With some filtration we can make it look with a little bit more character. Without filtration it's very clean and sharp and very neutral. These lenses, of course, are not in that category because they're anamorphic lenses. But if, well, within the realm of anamorphic lenses, I would definitely say that these are the lenses that you probably could bring on every shoot that needs anamorphic lenses. They're not as funky as the DZO Film Pavos, which are only, in my opinion, usable for really certain type of aesthetics. In this case, the lenses don't distract from the story at all, in my opinion. They actually draw the viewer in maybe a little bit more, because you have this feeling that you're looking at something cinematic. You want to know more. It's almost a way of indicating, okay, look, we're not looking at reality here, we're looking at a story of fiction. So in that sense, I think these lenses really have a lot of value, even for corporate shoots. So thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next. Hopefully we can do a lot more of these type of reviews. We really enjoy doing them. And see you next time. Thank you.